What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'll be taking you guys through the updated template draft. So we created this template draft about a week ago. I'm going to go over the updates to the player ownership as we have had a few new kind of signings that have taken the Premier League by storm. So all those kind of new additions, make any variations to the current ownership stats and the current template, well don't worry, I'll be going through that in this specific video. There's a big talking point about drafts and kind of FPL content creators in general. I see a lot of people kind of say drafts are pretty template, but to be honest with you, when I created my first draft, it was very similar to this and I looked at no content at all. So I just believe there's a lot of kind of good options this season, especially the way that FPL have priced them at. So don't be too disheartened if your team looks exactly the same as this draft. With that being said, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So before we get into the actual team, I want to give you guys a reminder that if you want to support the channel, you can become a YouTube member. It's going to be the first link in the description. If you guys choose to become a Legend member, you'll get exclusive Discord channels where you can chat to me one-on-one. But don't worry, there are still free channels on my Discord server. I reply to every comment, reply to every kind of Discord message usually. However, as a member, you'll get that kind of VIP treatment. But as I said, there are free channels and you guys can always follow me over on Twitter at DayvyFPL. But let's get back to the actual draft, and as you guys can see, the money in the bank is 0.0, so you guys can actually afford this team, and that's exactly what I wanted to do in this video. So the team structure and formation and players are affordable for this draft, so if you guys want to have a template draft, you can actually. Now I'm going to start off on the bench here, and the bench is pretty kind of cheap. However, these are options that are still quite highly owned. For example, Areola is the highest owned goalkeeper at the moment with 30.4%. Now what I want to say about Areola is I don't exactly know if he's going to be nailed to start for West Ham after Fabianski's actually had a pretty good preseason. So just pay attention to that kind of West Ham preseason as it goes on, but at the current moment, I don't exactly think he's going to start. So what I would recommend doing if you guys do own Areola, if you know for certain that he's going to be second choice at West Ham, I would opt for a cheaper goalkeeper, as with 30.4%, when the casuals see that he's not playing, they might transfer him out and therefore get a price drop. The same can be said about the forward department. You guys can see the 4.5 of a choice is Surridge at the moment, and the reason for that is that he will be actually leaving the Premier League fairly shortly. It looks like the clubs have agreed a fee for his transfer out, and therefore if you guys can get him into your team right now before he's deleted from FPL, that's the best scenario. The reason I'm saying that is that it's a rule that FPL's kind of created. If a player leaves the Premier League, they can't drop in price, and therefore he won't drop below 4.5. So you guys can use the same logic for a 4.0 goalkeeper, get a goalkeeper that might have left the Premier League, but I don't exactly know if you'll find one. Now in terms of other two positions, the 4.5 defender, it's a great slot to get at. There's a ton of 4.5s to look at, but the highest owned one is currently Botman with 26.2%. Now he's actually dropped in ownership since our first template video, as most people are looking away from the Newcastle defense. But I still like him as an option, and most people do, and that's why his ownership is quite high. Then finally, in terms of the 4.0 defender, there are a few that are kind of emerging. One is going to be from a newly promoted side, and that's going to be Bull, and he's owned by just below 20%. Now Bull actually had a new signing that just joined his club, and I'm going to keep my eyes on him in preseason because he also comes in at 4.0. But the bench is still pretty cheap except for the 4.5 defender, so not the cheapest bench as possible, but still pretty cheap. But now let's go on to the actual starting 11, and the starting goalkeeper of choice is going to be Ramsdale, and he's owned by just above 24%. Now if you guys are up with the news about the Premier League, you'll know that Onana has just signed for Manchester United, and his ownership has actually skyrocketed, so he might become the most template goalkeeper out there. But for the time being, Ramsdale is the highest owned goalkeeper, but as I said, I expect Onana to maybe overtake him. There are a few other goalkeepers to kind of look at, but most of them are generally split in ownership, which just shows this FPL season how hard it is to choose a goalkeeper. Let me know in the comments down below what goalkeeper you guys are currently on. If you guys have watched my latest draft, you know that I've got Steele from Brighton, but I'm currently looking at Flecken from Brentford if Raiders leave the club. But now let's go over our defensive department, and the third highest owned player is going to be a Stupinan from Brighton at 51.1%. So if you guys don't have coverage from that Brighton defense, could be Steele, it could be a Lewis Dunk, but it's probably a Stupinan. I would probably get that Brighton defensive coverage. Now all my eyes are going to be on how kind of Brighton's set up, because if Caicedo leaves to Chelsea, I really need to worry about the defensive department and those clean sheets. But for the time being, no questions asked, he's got that attacking threat, got that defensive threat, and that explains his high ownership. But I won't lie, when I was looking at places to potentially save cash, and all the players that have departed Brighton, don't exactly know how they're going to be defensively. We then have Luke Shaw, just signed Onana. Luke Shaw's ownership has dipped a little bit. We might see some more players going for the cheap Onana to the Luke Shaw 5.5, but currently he's owned by a third of the game. So in my own team, I don't have any coverage of the United defense. I just believe their fixtures coming up are pretty tough, especially from a defensive point of view, but maybe I must reevaluate that and get some United coverage. The nice thing about Luke Shaw, yes, you're paying that extra 0.5 over the goalkeeper, but does offer that attacking threat as a fullback. So if I do kind of drop Trent, decide to go for it, maybe Luke Shaw enters my team, but I might actually look at the cheaper goalkeeper Onana. Then I'll find a defender to go for, still has a very high ownership. Don't exactly think that our kind of underpriced options and best value videos have done this any justice. It's Kieran Trippier at 35%. So if you guys have watched those videos, as mentioned, the underpriced options, the best value options, you'll know that Kieran Trippier, if he continues the form of last season, is simply outstanding, but that's a big question mark. Will Newcastle keep as many clean sheets? Will Trippier be kind of as attacking heavy as he was? Or will we see a drop off like he did towards the end of last season? But 34.5% of managers don't think so. They've put him in their team, and I can understand it. I think my personal strategy for Kieran Trippier is to hold off for now, let those bad fixtures kind of turn, but then have a plan to bring him in. But this back three, in terms of the FPL community, I've seen a Stupinan in a load of drafts, but already haven't seen the Shaw Trippier combination. Let me know in the comments down below, is this your back three of your current draft, or have you gone slightly different? But now let's go into that midfield department, and the second highest owned player is going to start off our midfield. It's going to be Bukayo Saka from Arsenal. So he comes in with the lovely ownership of 53%, but even to me that's a little bit too low. I just believe Saka is one of the most underpriced options this Premier League season, and I do prefer him to a Martinelli or an Odegaard. 8.5 is a very cheap price to pay from, and if he does keep penalties, he's even a better option. Added to that, Arsenal have great fixtures coming up, so would recommend getting a player, but probably a double up or a triple up. But no questions have to be asked about Saka, and the next option, Rashford, also owned by 43.2%. So both these two assets on most of our drafts. Now yes, you guys could go for a cheap alternative from United, but I do prefer Rashford, 9.0 million, more expensive, but still great value for money. Now I'll be seeing our United set up over this preseason because they've signed some new options, however that attack should probably stay the same. I guess the big hope for United fans is they do sign a new striker, but that could make Rashford a worse option in FPL because he might have started up front. But that's kind of a hope and a dream, but to kind of usually he starts on the wing, where he was quite good last season. Next up, we have a Japanese international, it's Mitoma from Brighton. Interesting debate this week that I saw was should we actually be considering a Solly March from a differential point of view. If you guys watch my differential draft, you know that Solly March is my favorite kind of differential in the midfield department, as his stats and Mitoma's are quite close. Now towards the end of last season, both players didn't have the best end to the season, and that's why I'm raising the question of should you actually be going for Mitoma and not Solly March. In my current draft, I didn't include any of them, so I need some coverage from that Brighton attack. So who would you guys go for? He does come in quite cheap though at 6.5, so very flexible spot, could go for Eze, could go for another alternative, but currently he's quite well owned. Next up, he's gone from kind of the 5th to the 4th most owned midfielder. It's Bruno Fernandes or Bruno Fernandes. I do apologize, whatever pronunciation you guys want to go for. There's been kind of a war in my comments recently about the pronunciation, so I'll just call him Bruno. So the ownership of Bruno is bang on 25%, so 4th of the game do own the Portuguese international, and he comes in at a great price of 8.5 million. So do you guys have the double up of Rashford and Bruno in your current draft, or have you gone for one or the other? I've gone for the double up as I just believe the price points are there. Spoke about it with Luke Shaw, the fixtures aren't the best in the world, but I do believe these are both long-term holds. Then our final midfielder to go over is going to be the ever popular Mbeumo, just under 24%. With the suspension of Ivan Toney, will Mbeumo start up front? Looks like it might be Visa up front and Mbeumo on the wing, or even as a second striker. I still like him though at his price point, 6.5 million, great price point to get him at, especially if he becomes the talisman without Ivan Toney. But this kind of midfield 5 is super template. Chances are you guys own probably 3 or 4 of them, might even own 5 of them. Comment them down below how many you guys own. Now there were a few other additions to this which I'll talk about shortly, but this is the most affordable combination. Now going up front, the most owned player in the game at the moment, you would have predicted it. I put the Campsy armband on him because he's the captain of the ownership. It's Erling Haaland with 86.2%. This ownership has only increased since the last video that we did, and if you guys are going without Erling Haaland, you must be absolutely maverick. Are there any of you that are actually going without Haaland? I know someone in my previous video said that he's going without Haaland because he just doesn't want to own a player that doesn't get him gains, which I can kind of understand. But it's a very risky strategy, especially at the start of the season, so I wouldn't recommend it. So I think that you guys should probably start with him. But nothing much more needs to be said about him. Even at 14.0 million, that wasn't enough to deter kind of his high ownership, and probably the perma captain for the start of the season. Then our final kind of forward to go over in the final player in our template draft is going to be Gabriel Jesus from Arsenal. So his ownership, 32.4%, has stayed pretty constant, and in my opinion, is a great Arsenal asset. Now my latest draft actually dropped Jesus for Martinelli. I went for Nkunku up front. That's kind of a 50-50 in my opinion, very kind of close between them. But who are you guys on? Are you rather going for Martinelli or are you going for Jesus? But let me know in the comments down below, how many of this draft do you guys own? Don't have to look at the bench, just look at the starting 11. How many of the starting 11 do you guys own? I would probably say about 7 or 6 on my end. but I know there might be those of you out there with 11 out of 11, so comment down below if that's you. Now there were some other additions that we could have gone for. A Martinelli and Odegaard are also quite well owned, around 20% owned, but let's go on to two that I want a special mention for. So the two players I want to go over, the first one is going to be Mo Salah from Liverpool, 24.5%, so would have slotted in as the kind of 5th most owned player under Bruno at 25%. Now we already have done a Mo Salah draft, we released that yesterday, go check that video out if you guys want to, but I'm going to add a combination tomorrow of Salah and also Trent. So on screen right now, Trent comes in at 31.0%, so just on the dot of that percentage, so about a third of the game. So if you told me kind of last season, the season before, that Mo Salah and Trent would have such low ownerships, I probably would have raised my eyebrows. But this season I can kind of understand it. Trent comes in quite expensive, 8.0 million, Salah 12.5, and the big thing about Salah is that you probably won't captain him for the majority of game weeks. So that kind of negates his value for money. If you guys watch my previous videos, the best value, the underpriced, the overpriced options, you know exactly what I'm talking about. At his price point, not great value if you don't captain him. But then with Trent, if he has an absolute banging start to the season, he's still going to be worth his value. I just want to see in preseason where he's actually going to play. For Liverpool, he's been playing at a kind of a CDM role, but I just believe that's because they don't really have a fit CDM at the moment. I think personally that he will start at right back for game week 1, and that might be his best position. So comment down below both these two options. Yes, they might not be the most template picks, but do you guys own them in your current teams, and how those drafts actually looking with them in? Otherwise, as I mentioned, comment down below how many of the template drafts you guys do have. I'm on 6 or 7. But this is basically going to wrap up the video, guys. Hope you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you didn't, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for tons of content coming up, tons of drafts with 2 weeks left to the Premier League season. But I'm going to sign off. This has been Dayvy FPL and I'm out. Cheers, bye.